Our next speaker has been at this for a long time. He's the executive director of Fair Test, the National Center for Fair and Open Testing, which has been battling the overuse and misuse of tests for more than 25 years. Monty Neill.
Thank you. I'm pleased and proud to be in New York because you folks are the center of the national resistance to high-stakes testing. And I'm honored especially to be with the refusers, the teachers, the students, and the parents who have said, no, I won't have my child tested. And to be with all the people who back up the refusers, because I'm now a grandparent and I don't get to refuse for my kids. Last year we knew at Fair Test for the first time since we started that there was a brewing movement. They were opting out in New York. There were students were walking out in Chicago and Portland, doing zombie marches in Providence, walking out in Seattle, and the teachers boycotted in Seattle, and the moms that the Texas Mothers Against Drunk Testing pushed the legislature to pass changes. We knew a movement was growing, and now we see that it has grown by leaps and bounds from a few thousand opt-outs to more than 30,000 who have said no. And across the country, we know the language of that movement. Less testing, more learning. Stop high-stakes testing. And yes, we know that good teaching involves good assessing. We know that our communities have a right to know how well our schools are doing, but we want to do that fairly and openly with good high-quality assessments, not with those crummy, dumbed-down, narrow, standardized tests. We know, despite all the claims, that the high-stakes testing regime has not improved schools. We can look at standardized tests like NAEP and find that since NCLB came in, the rate of progress has slowed and flattened for both subjects, all 3 grades, and virtually every demographic group. High-stakes testing does not work, but the politicians and the big corporations and the hedge funders and their flunkies that run all these organizations, the big foundations like Gates, the New York Times, they call for data-driven teaching and they won't pay any attention to their own data. Instead, they say, oh, but we got to win world economic competition, as if filling in the bubble on a standardized test enabled a kid to get a good job. Or as if the purpose with schooling was simply to become a cog in the production machine rather than to be a full human being who's an active citizen and a lifelong learning and a caring parent. They say close the achievement gap while they ignore the real factors that cause the opportunity gap and refuse to pay the education debt owed to generations of Black and Latino children and Native American children and our immigrant children and our kids with disabilities and our working class children. They refuse that, and we now are fighting back. Not only that, in fact, the gaps are widening by their own measures. They say that education is the civil rights movement of our time, but testing hurts and does not help equity. Going all the way back to those racist IQ tests that are the root of all that testing that are still administered to our kids. Testing distracts from addressing the real issues of poverty and inequality and racism that control so much of our system. Testing is an excuse to close the schools that disrupt what goes on the everyday life of our communities, yet they say they want to help our communities, but they close the schools. So, what have they done? When their data says it doesn't work, they double down on it. We go from NCLB to NCLB on steroids called Race to the Top, and now those fake waivers that instead say use the tests to judge all the teachers, not just all the schools. And they turn the schools into test prep programs that do not provide a real or meaningful education for the whole child, that all all our children deserve. And so what happens? People fight back. In 25 years, I've been doing this. Now we see a real movement. We have a long way to go, but we can get there when we unite and keep on struggling as we have been, not only in New York, but all the way across the country. We've got to tell our legislators in no uncertain terms that if they want their jobs, they're going to pass laws that cut back on the amount of testing, that make the assessment process honest and transparent, like a proposed law in New York will do, truth in testing, that we are going to end the high-stakes use of testing, and we're going to turn schools back to real education systems with high-quality assessment. Together, we will win. Thank you.